To survive, boy will need an incredible skill. In this world, stability is maintained by making the strong even stronger, and the strongest can also eat more, thus increasing their spiritual energy. But one soldier discovers a mysterious power in this world. In the midst of a battle, the leader of one side is informed that the left flank is fighting well and managing to defend the plantation, but the right flank is being pushed back. Amid the war zone, humans resist the invasion of giant primates, wreaking havoc on the defensive lines. Among the protectors is Kai, who stands alone against a semi-human and calls his comrade Manso for help. However, Kai is knocked down and left vulnerable as new enemies surround the young fighter, while Manso is thrown away by a blow. Kai was about to be hit when a man strikes the primate from behind and saves the boy. Having done that, this warrior introduces himself as Alha, the eldest son of Malak Vezin, and the humans around celebrate the arrival of their lord. Tired of the invasion of these apes, Alha commands the foes to behold the power of the earth god residing within him. Instantly, the divine crest is activated on the noble's face, a proof before all that he bears the god's blessing. Soon, the apes attack again, but Alha easily cuts off the arm of the first and the head of the second. In their own language, one of the primates tells the others to back off, while he himself steps forward to challenge the blessed warrior alone. This ape is different from the others as he also bears a divine crest that radiates on his face, which theoretically would make the fight balanced. Confident, the semi-human charges with all his fury, but Alha's speed is unmatched. Using his agility, the man dodges a powerful blow while delivering an extremely deep cut to his opponent, ending the battle sooner than anyone could have imagined. Thus, the inhabitants of Lag Village raise their flags and celebrate the victory, as the remaining apes flee following the death of their leader. Observing the horrifying chaos left on the battlefield, Manso comments to Kai that they survived another day. Amid this, Alha extracts the divine stone from the enemy chief to feed on it. Then he orders his allies to do the same with the stones of other dead primates. Consuming the substance, the Lord is graced with a reddish aura around his body. Manso breaks a divine stone and shares it with his comrades. Before partaking, he gives thanks to Mother Earth and the spirit of the brave Earth God passed down to them by their ancestors. As the soldiers ingest the substance, they feel their spiritual energy increasing. Since eating the marrow of a divine stone boosts spiritual energy and makes you stronger, Kai wants to take more. But Manso warns him that it won't happen because they are merely common soldiers. Amid this, a warrior informs the Lord that the other stones will be delivered to the castle. An older fighter named Master Basco tells Manso and Kai that most of these items should be delivered to the blessing bearers, like Lord Alha. After all, stability is maintained by making the strong even stronger. That's how this world works. Realizing this, Kai laments that common soldiers like them need to become stronger without the aid of such useful resources. Later, at a feast involving the village residents, the leader declares that human lands in remote areas like theirs have been under attack by semi-humans for a long time. Yet Lag has been defended thanks to the effort of its brave warriors. He, Malak Vezin, is proud of each one of them. Sick of the talk, Manso just wants to eat quickly. And luckily for him, Moloch concludes the speech with a brief prayer of thanks to Mother Earth. Elated, Manso attacks the food but struggles with a part of the meal that is extremely tough to bite. Around him, another soldier at a table would love to eat as much as his comrades. Then a companion remarks that he just needs to work harder. By the way, Kai notes how lucky Manso is to get more grub than him, and the friend replies that he isn't the squad leader for nothing. With that said, Kai vows to train until he drops and gets stronger for a more worthy diet. Keeping his promise, the young warrior trains with his spear in the middle of the night, but ends up falling on his back on the ground after missing a step. Definitely, the meager food he gets isn't enough. As our grandmothers say, an empty sack cannot stand upright. Furious, the boy yells for a rice ball. Then Manso arrives at that very moment and asks what the heck a rice ball is. The friend explains that it just came to his mind, and although he doesn't know what it is, he's sure it must taste good. Manso responds that the kid sometimes really flips out, which he agrees with completely, even if he has no idea why. Finally, Kai asks his buddy to look at the village graves meant for people with families, and then compare them to the graves for people like him, who have no parents or siblings. They are just twigs and stones covered in vines because these people have no one to mourn their death. Therefore, the boy believes he is doomed to be forgotten. Being honest, he feels as though he never lived in this village from the start, and this creates a need to not accept this reality. And that's why the warrior will become as strong as he can to survive. For that to happen, he needs to eat the little food available and train harder than anyone else. But not just that is enough. To survive, Kai needs something to help him win battles, like a skill that could elevate his status to another level. Listening to every word, Manso reinforces his theory that this kid lives in a fantasy world. Meanwhile, Alha is in the middle of a discussion with his sister Jose. According to the Blessed Warrior, their father does not expect the girl to do what he does, considering that the women of the Baron's house do not need to learn to fight. Saying this, Alha takes the staff from his sister's hand and walks away, and Jose laments that she could have helped the village if she were a man. Returning to the private, he's training with the squad leader who makes it clear that the kid won't win any battles if he just keeps backing down. At one point, Kai is hit and falls on his back again, but instead of colliding with the ground, his body simply sinks into a fantastical sea that was covered in embers. Suddenly, an electrical reaction charges his floating body up to a modern city in another world, while his hand generates a layer of strange energy. Kai wakes up at this very moment and starts to believe he was the victim of some magic. Manso thinks he's knocked another screw loose in the poor kid's head with the blow and apologizes, but Kai gets up with strange confidence and a smile on his face. Alone with his thoughts, he reflects that he was confronted again with memories of things he never experienced in life. Sometimes he sees unknown memories that he's never heard of, and as far as he knows, some people are like that. But there's no way he can tell someone he also goes through this, not even Manso. In fact, it was these memories that introduced Kai to rice balls, but these visions changed nothing in his life, even if it is magic or something of the sort. Indeed, Kai has never seen magic in his life because that's something that only exists in fairy tales, but for some reason, these things keep appearing in these weird visions. Now, if by some chance he could use spells in a battle, it certainly wouldn't be bad. Later that same night, Moloch Vezin receives a message through one of the village's trained eagles. Upon entering his home, he discusses with Olha about a horde of orcs that appeared in the forest to the west, indicating that the battle will be fought near Villa Banya. The alliance ceremony is due in a few days, so Villa Lag must hurry there. Yesterday it was the monkeys, and now the orcs are ready to cause headaches again. Moloch laments that the soldiers simply don't have time to rest, but his son reminds him that it is a soldier's duty to march and shed blood to defend their land without question. Still, the leader argues that all the villagers are Moloch's children. Unable to sleep, Kai comments on the absurdity of producing flames with his hand. In the bed next to him, Manso wants to understand what trip he's on now, and Kai explains that he was thinking about something like a waking dream. Manso says that it might not be a dream, as there was once a traveling monk who, without a fire sign in a completely dark place, raised his finger and summoned flames, using it as if it were light. Kai is impressed by this and asks if it's really true, and his friend says it's just a story he once heard. The next day, the young dreamer leaves the dormitory early in the morning and thinks about what he heard before falling asleep. Perhaps, for some reason, he might also be able to draw fire from his fingers. That is, if this magic thing uses magical power. If that's what it is. As far as it is known, this business is obtained by gathering the mysterious power that exists in the world. And the world in which Kai lives is also made of a mysterious power. Spiritual energy is within each person and increases when they eat divine stones. If a good amount of this energy is gathered, perhaps the boy might be surprised with something special. To test his theory, Kai first goes to the plantation at the back of the dormitory and tries to summon fire with his finger through a vocal command, but nothing happens. Then, he holds his wrist with the other hand and focuses all his mind on the finger, but it seems that mere desire is not enough. The question would be how he can gather spiritual energy. Considering that this energy is probably inside his chest, Kai focuses his mind to feel that area of his body, and feels a kind of heat where his divine stone would supposedly be. Letting himself be carried away by this heat, he points his finger forward again to try to shoot fire, but with the force he was making, it was easier to drop his butt. Amid this, a legion of orcs marches westward, leaving a trail of dead humans along the way until reaching the vicinity of Villa Lag. Without delay, Master Basco learns from a message from the Baron of Villa Bagna that the enemy species is observing their movement from within the forest. In a joint action, soldiers from both villages unite to investigate the woods, and when orcs are seen lurking, a group of human scouts advances on them, including Kai and Manso among the battalion. Manso pierces the chest of the first target and knocks him down. Kai tries to maintain his balance amidst this duel, but ends up being hit by a comrade from Bagna who was thrown on top of him. The responsible orc slowly approaches his next victim, who is trapped under the dead soldier and can't get free. But just when he would be killed, Kai is saved by numerous arrows that hit the monster. Enraged, Manso orders Kai to stop messing around, while the young fighter feels a sharp pain in his leg. Meanwhile, Lord Alha shoots through the trees of the forest and sinks an orc's head into the ground without even needing his weapon. At the same time, the other giant pigs that saw what happened to their buddy flee, and Alha chases after them. A soldier thinks about pursuing the enemy as well, but a colleague warns that it's no use, as they are invisible to the Lord's eyes. Manso is forced to carry his injured partner, who apologizes for causing this trouble. Suddenly, a soldier alerts that Lord Alha has left this area to the soldiers, which confuses the squad leader since they still have orcs in the fight. Kai asks his friend to leave him there, but of course, Manso refuses and carries the young man back to the base. Master Basco orders the rest of the squadrons to spread out and run, so the orcs can't pursue everyone. To the misfortune of the young injured man, there was an orc pursuing him and his companion, but very slowly just to have fun. Knowing that the two will die there if things stay as they are, Kai asks Manso to leave without him. After all, Manso would do the same if it were the other way around. Saddened by the harsh reality, the ally promises to tear the vines off the boy's tomb, then runs off. Finally, when Manso takes off running, Kai heads back into the eye of the storm, where his comrades are fleeing and dying at the hands of rival semi-humans. Meanwhile, the young man refuses to die, reminding himself of this as often as necessary while memories of his life flash before his eyes. Soon, he stops when he senses the presence of his pursuer and demands that he stop hiding and face him. As a last resort, the human attempts to cast magic from his finger, but nothing happens. Suddenly, a machete flies towards the boy, slicing through his shoulder and causing faint sparks to fly from his index finger. The orc who threw the machete charges at the boy and grabs his neck tightly. Yet Kai continues to refuse to die, not wanting his spiritual energy to be extinguished in this place. With that, the boy's chest begins to burn so intensely that it ignites slightly stronger sparks on his finger. Kai points his finger at the enemy and orders fire magic to appear, and that's exactly what happens. A layer of flames spits out into the face of the giant pig with such intensity that it forces the brute to release the human. In the end, the orc tries to rejoin the fight but succumbs to his injuries and falls. Watching what happened, still amazed, Kai feels proud of himself, although he can't control the fire still covering his hand and burning his body. To make matters worse, he collapses to the ground without knowing why, and now a chill begins to take over his body as if his life is being drained by having used too much spiritual energy. This makes Kai think he might die right there, but since he managed to ignite the fire, he imagines he might also be able to extinguish what remains on his finger, perhaps with water. Moreover, this reminds him that spiritual energy flows like water, and that it's necessary to close the imaginary gate to stem the flow. As if that weren't enough, the orc manages to get up and goes after the boy. Faced with this life or death pressure, Kai closes the gates of his mind and stops the flow of water that sustains the flame on his finger. However, still weak, the boy is carried by the pig without being able to react. Even though he can barely see due to his injuries, the orc takes his victim to a cliff to kill him as he deserves. But since he was going to die anyway, Kai takes a final breath and slashes the belly of his adversary with his knife. In this motion, both of them fall off the cliff and plunge into the water waiting below. Even weakened, the young man emerges from the water alive and sees his seemingly dead enemy beside him. Kai approaches and extracts the core to digest it, as he is out of spiritual energy and won't be able to leave without regaining his strength. Upon consuming the liquid, the young warrior walks to a tree to rest at its root, realizing it was the first time he had eaten an entire divine stone. Despite this, the wound on his shoulder is too deep and the bleeding won't stop, leading Kai to believe this might be his end. Near death, He observes the beautiful landscape around him and believes he will depart from this world happy to have had the privilege of witnessing such beauty in his last breath, even though he did not wish to die so soon. Regardless of his wishes, the boy faints, completely drained of strength. At night, the soldiers gather after the battle. One asks Manso where the rookie who was with him is, but seeing the squad leader's silent reaction, he decides to drop the subject, as unfortunately, such losses are all too common. Many hours later, as the sun rises on the horizon, Kai is awakened by its radiant glow after blacking out for the entire night. He was certain he had died, but for some reason, the wound on his shoulder had healed and no longer hurt. The warrior suspects it's due to the org's spiritual stone, yet it's strange that he healed after just one night's sleep. Taking a closer look at the tree he leaned on to sleep, the vines wrapping around the trunk felt oddly familiar to him, though he couldn't explain why. Then, he notices something carved into the wood. He casts a fire spell to see more clearly under the plants. To his surprise, the spell was so powerful that it threw him a great distance, and looking at his reflection in the water after being tossed, the boy sees his face covered by a divine emblem, the mark of the blessed. Suddenly, the emblem disappears, and Kai returns to the tree to decipher what was written, but he had never seen those letters before. Not understanding how his face bore a divine emblem, he runs to a pile of crumbled rocks to escape, but during his climb, his emblem reappears, and the strength from it causes him to break one of the rocks he used to ascend. Back on the sand, he picks up another rock to make sure it was indeed he who broke it with his own hands. Amidst this, a voice in his mind utters the word "Go," prompting Kai to scale the cliff with dazzlingly high leaps. Disbelieving what he had done, he reaches the forest and looks down at the mysterious tree that seems to have awakened something within him. As he walks deeper into the forest, Kai thinks the power he acquired is even more incredible than magic, but he wonders if it really could be a god's blessing. Anyway, if he truly is blessed, he celebrates the fact that he can eat as many spiritual stones as he wants. But then another doubt arises. Maybe he isn't blessed, despite having a divine emblem. Whatever it is, it's best kept a secret for now. Hours later, Manso does his duty with a sad expression, but soon he relaxes and smiles when Kai emerges from the forest. A day later, despite his disappearance and the serious injury he sustained, the young man was back to work as usual. Alarmed, some colleagues approach Kai and ask how far he plans to plow the land alone. Looking around, the boy realizes he has almost completely plowed the field by himself, something humanly impossible, at least in theory. At least, looking at his reflection in the water of a bucket, he notices his emblem didn't appear, even though he had exerted so much effort. During the rest period, the folks think something is wrong with this kid, so he justifies that he ate divine stones until he was full, and that's why he's so strong. During the battle at Banya village, a group of orgs was killed in the forest, and Kai claims he ate 10 or 20 of them, since he was injured and hungry. Manso buys the story and recalls hearing about someone who greatly evolved after eating several such stones. Thus, it might be that the kid really jumped levels overnight. Meanwhile, a woman notices Elsa eyeing the men and asks if anything there caught her interest. Nearby, Lady Jose asks Master Basco how the preparations are going, and he shows that he chose the best offerings for the tombstone. Remote lands like their village are scarce, but the people manage to harvest well thanks to the feats of the Lord of the Domain and the Earth God within him. After all, the blessed are the protectors of the land, and their strength makes the land fertile. After making sure no one was looking, Kai goes back to the dormitory grounds to practice his magic. This time, focusing his finger with a vocal command, he actually manages to fire flames and also doesn't feel his spiritual energy depleting. Therefore, he's sure he now possesses incredible power, but still doesn't know if he is blessed or not. Unfortunately, the boy is caught by Lady Jose, who tries to understand why the kid's finger is on fire. Kai tries to give some excuse to get away, but the Lord's daughter insists on knowing what he's doing there. Thus, Kai ends up telling the truth and reveals he was trying to produce flames from an ability he acquired, though he doesn't exactly know how. With this, Jose asserts that the boy might have a talent for being an ability user, a person who uses mysterious techniques that seem impossible. That's what members of special families from the central region and some monks are called. Honestly, Kai thought that was magic, but the girl has no idea what that word means. Setting that aside, she notices Kai didn't even get tired from all this and wants to know if he's the boy from the rumors, who ate a bunch of divine stones and became powerful. When he confirms it, she observes that the boy is still intact because he has more spiritual energy than usual, so he might be stronger in every way too. With this in mind, Lady Jose decrees that Kai will train with her. Without delay, the two began a mock combat right from the start. Feeling the pressure from his opponent, Kai realized the power that the blessing could bestow upon a person. With his crest pulsing, Jose asked if that was all the kid could do after devouring so many divine stones, prompting Kai to promise to pick up the pace. After the exercise, he looked at his face in the water once more, believing that his crest hadn't appeared at all during training, which meant he hadn't pushed himself hard enough. Then, he carried a bucket of water for the Lord's daughter to clean up and confessed that he thought all the blessed were equally strong. Jose responded that she was still weak and that her father and brother were much stronger. According to her, the strength of the blessed varied depending on the strength of their earth god. But the blessed themselves must also train and develop, and that's what the girl still needed more training. Kai responded that she didn't need to train so hard, which annoyed Jose, as it seemed he was implying that women didn't need to be strong just because they weren't required to go to war, when, in fact, blessed women were also protectors of the land, and there always came a time when they had to fight. Moreover, of course, those who possess the blessing become powerful to win battles, but that's not the only reason. Jose was about to explain that reason but was interrupted by a sound signaling the time for something that needed to be done. Soon, she gathered her things to leave unnoticed, as her father was unaware that she trained this way. Kai asked her to finish explaining the other reason why the blessed train, so the girl invited him to join her in the monthly cleaning of a tombstone shortly. Kai questioned what that was, and Jose mentioned that her earth god was celebrated in Ida village, but she would only share the rest when they were there. Sometime later, a group of soldiers led by Manso escorted Lady Jose to that village. The commander warned his subordinates to stay alert, as this domain was monkey territory. One soldier asked Kai if the rumor was true, that their squad had been chosen for the escort because the Lord's daughter had chosen his company. Manso interjected to say that Lady Jose didn't even know this kid, but some among the men believed the rumor, making Kai the center of attention in the group. Further ahead, upon reaching a ruin on the way, a soldier told Manso and Kai that this village had once belonged to the Moloch family, but they had fled from being attacked by demi-humans so often. In any case, there was still a tombstone there, and their mission was to prevent the earth gods from continuing to receive proper treatment, with a worthy homage to the dead. Besides that, the soil of this region had become completely infertile, given that the grace of the earth god had diminished and was not reaching this territory. With that said, to the surprise of the seasoned warrior, Lady Jose approached and told Flynn that she wanted Kai's company to take a look around the village. Jose led Kai to an area where there had once been a plantation, but now it was just a pile of dead flowers in a turned and dead field. In turn, Jose prayed for the grace of her god to gather in that space, creating a red aura that flowed through the plants. She explained that the blessed had the power to do this, but unfortunately, the spirit of the god had weakened too much after Ida village was abandoned, and it also had to be taken into account that Jose herself, the blessed of this region, was not strong, and all she could do was tend to this small flower garden. For instance, the plantations of Lag village grew well because her father was strong, always keeping up his training and consuming divine stones to maintain the power necessary for the health of that soil. The stronger the blessed of that land, the more fertile the land will be. The more fertile the land becomes, the more powerful the god gets. In short, as Jose had said, the blessed don't train just to fight, but also to honor the power of their god. Nearby, a soldier returned from a subterranean passage and confirmed that there was nothing unusual inside. Flynn ordered Squad 1 to stay there and protect the area, while the rest would go down with Lady Jose. Once in the depths of the underground passage, Kai encountered the tombstone of the earth god and noticed that the same inscription was also on the stone of the valley, making him think that it too was a tombstone of a god. Soon, the boy discovered that he could read what was written if he touched the tomb. It said, "I, Idolin, am your servant. I serve the god of Lagdalacta." Then, he moved to another side of the tombstone to try reading, but this time he couldn't. He understood what each word meant, like temple or pact, but they didn't form any sentence. Jose asked why the crazy guy was talking to himself, and distracted, Kai ended up looking at the girl's neckline, which made him even weirder than he already was. Around the ruin, two monkeys approached the area and saw the movement of the humans. Inside the subterranean passage, Kai shared that he didn't know Jose trained to become strong for Ida village, and she shared that one day she intended to rebuild the village. After all, she had received the protection of Idolin, the earth god of Eda village, which made her responsible for this place. Thus, the woman promised to one day become strong enough to cultivate all types of plants and make the flowers she loved in this village bloom, so that many people would come to live there. Listening to her speech, some soldiers around got excited to accompany the lady on her mission, while Kai reflected that a blessed had a responsibility to the land, the gods, and the people. He himself, on the other hand, had no land, god, nor responsibility. At that moment, a warrior alerted those present that there was a threat lurking outside. Outside, Flynn ordered Manso to send his squad to escort Lady Jose and escape through the front, while some men threw sand over the tomb to hide it quickly. Regarding the rest of the soldiers, they should attack the enemy from the rear. Jose approaches with a spear and announces she will join the fight, but Flynn reminds her of her importance. Therefore, she must return safely to Lag village. Moreover, Jose has no combat experience. Hearing this, the girl is hurt by those words, but there's no time for that, so Manso accompanies her to a safe place. The two monkeys approach the ruin, and one of them throws a stone at a soldier who is shielding himself behind a broken wall. Manso's squad runs with the Lord's daughter in the lead, but the other monkey from the pair catches up and even steps on the flower garden Jose was trying to cultivate. Extremely nervous about this, the girl steps in front of the others and points her spear at the enemy. To make matters worse, another giant monkey suddenly appears, but Jose does not falter and introduces herself as the daughter of Moloch Vezin, claiming that the power of the earth god resides in her body. Similarly, the opponent does not back down. Then, when Kai sees the monkey about to hit the woman with his axe, he pushes her back and rips open his chest with his spear. Following that, the boy picks up the simian's weapon from the ground and runs towards the next one, striking a spear blow into its chest. However, the monkey remains standing and knocks the human's spear away, leaping to plunge the axe into his opponent's shoulder and then the dagger into his back. From this moment, Lady Jose sees the divine crest on the young soldier's face. After the battle, Alha scorned her sister for stepping in front of the enemy only to embarrass herself, hoping she had gotten the message this time since, as everyone knows, women don't need to learn to fight. Jose was about to argue against this, but the tribe chief intervened, saying what mattered was that his daughter was safe. Regardless, the two siblings should not let their guard down in this area, and an inspector from the central region would soon visit. After Alha left to inform the soldiers about this, Lady Jose asked her father for forgiveness for her actions. Uninterested, Moloch highlighted the name of Kai, the recruit who could defeat a monkey on his own, and he had high hopes for him in the future. Meanwhile, two of Kai's peers teased him after he was hailed as the hero of Eda village. Kai claimed it was just a fluke, but it was too late. The boys had heard from Akiza and others that the kid had sent the monkeys packing without hesitation, and he had even befriended Lady Jose in the process. The women working nearby, seeing a man applying a chokehold for free to a friend, wondered why every man was like that, until Manso arrived at the trio Ternura and asked what they were doing standing around. One of the women remarked to her colleagues that this boy, who had consumed several divine stones, might actually be promising. They then noticed Elsa looking oddly at Kai and teased that she had a crush on him. In the midst of this, Jose approached Kai and asked him for a moment, their relationship somewhat alarming the people. Eventually, Jose took Kai aside and thanked him for saving her in Ida village, mentioning the divine crest she saw on his face during the fight, though she wasn't sure if she had imagined it. Speaking of the fight, she confessed she had frozen in front of the enemy, which made her realize that being strong wasn't enough. Skill and a mind to use whatever was necessary were also required. With that in mind, she decided to train every day, starting tomorrow morning, and she wanted Kai to join her. Later, Kai was chopping wood for the village while pondering the invitation he had received. Elsa approached the young man and handed him some water. With a stern face, she said she was only doing it because others had told her to. The boy drank the water and expressed his gratitude as he was thirsty, until Elsa's colleague called her to help with something. As she left, Manso suddenly appeared just to remark that spring had come early for the fellow. Suddenly, a bird's call caught Kai's attention. He felt as though he had heard it before. In fact, he remembered hearing it in that valley, which sparked a desire to go there. At night, while everyone was asleep, Kai was awakened by the same bird's song. He got out of bed and headed toward the sound. With a majestic leap, he jumped over the village wall and used his newfound strength to boost his run in a way he never imagined possible. In his mind, it was as if he had become the wind itself. Confident in his new abilities, he jumped off a cliff and landed in a river. Surfacing, he let out a laugh while floating in the water and noted how much he enjoyed this valley. He then saw the bird that had been chirping, and it was flying around a tree that seemed to want to show something to him somehow. There, a huge stone was enveloped by the roots of the giant tree, with inscriptions that Kai, unfortunately, could not read, just as he hadn't been able to at the tombstone in Ida village. Regardless, Kai believed he had survived because this tree had bestowed a blessing on him, so he thanked it for the great help. With a tool he had on hand, he cleaned the tombstone as a sign of care and respect, while we see a shoulder guard of war on a nearby stone. After cleaning up, the boy ran through the night and noticed how strange it was that he could see everything so clearly, even though it was not daytime. Further along, he drank water from the river and picked a fruit from the valley, so thrilled with the fertility of these forests that he considered living there. In fact, he took it seriously and thought about building a house in the place, then climbed the cliff and concluded that he needed to fix some trees, but his sword wouldn't do, so magic would have to be the way. Thus, the boy attempted to form a blade of fire in his hand to cut the trunk, but ended up setting the wood on fire and thwarting his plan. Nevertheless, Kai didn't give up and thought of an alternative. As he knew, magic transformed what he imagined into reality, so the trick was the imagination. Cutting something meant breaking the bonds between molecules, and remembering that fact made the boy visualize a scene where he didn't necessarily cut the molecules, but instead undid the bonds by sliding an invisible blade between them. However, a sudden flight of birds in the forest interrupted the process, making him think someone was approaching. Indeed, a group of orcs was lurking in the valley by dawn and seemed to be on a mission. Like them, Kai saw a group of humans preparing a rope to descend into the valley, so he conjured his crest and charged at them. Upon nearing those beings, he discovered they were not humans, but rather looked more like children with pointy ears and funny faces. One of the little ones approached with a knife and showed undue bravery by threatening the supposed intruder, until a more experienced companion calmed the young Ketchak and introduced himself to the human as Lord Porek, leader of the Coral people. Kai admitted he had never seen anyone from this species before and was surprised that they spoke the human language fluently. Then, Porek explained that they had regular interactions with human traders, as the men considered the coral's craftsmanship extremely valuable. With that, the man knelt alongside his countrymen and apologized for entering a restricted area without permission. They had come to implore Kai for the ancient covenant of the great god of the valley, believing that this boy was a deity resembling humans. Upon hearing this, the corals bowed before the young man, who was taken aback by this unexpected behavior. Later, Porek meets with Kai by a campfire and shares that, since ancient times, the corals lived peacefully in the forests and worshipped the earth gods. However, a few days ago, the pigs or orgs, as they are called, attacked his people in an attempt to seize their earth god. Unfortunately, the coral species is too fragile to contend with warriors as strong as these, resulting in their expulsion from the lands they had inhabited for years. Now, all they can do is flee. Due to this situation, their race's leader has pleaded with the god of arbitration for salvation. Kai doesn't understand why he is being called this way, so Porek explains that an arbitrary deity is one whose great power surpasses that of all creatures and protects all of creation. Kai responds that he is far from being such a grand entity, and Ketchak also finds it hard to believe that this boy could be a true god of arbitration. After all, the avatar of the valley god they began to worship was a warrior who meted out severe punishments to the unfaithful, and this small human could not compare to that legendary figure. Still, Porek believes Kai is the right person, as he had once entered the valley without permission as a youth and endured God's wrath, gaining a condition that affects his eyes. Upon meeting the god of the valley, he lost his sight but began to see all kinds of things. According to the Coral, this world is filled with spiritual light, the light of spiritual energy, and Porek sees that Kai is imbued with a noble blue light of this kind, making him realize at first glance that the boy is the god of arbitration who has received the valley's blessing. Moreover, the elder mentions that he has already offered a sacrifice to the god. His granddaughter Aru gave her life to the valley. Outraged by this situation, Kai leaps into the valley in an attempt to save the girl. The corals try to pull the rope to bring her back, but it snaps. Quickly, the human reaches the injured coral and, remembering how he healed his own wounds, thinks he could do the same for her by imagining her getting better. Thus, the boy visualizes the cells in his mind, although he doesn't quite know what they are, but he focuses his efforts on imagining them restoring in some way. This visualization generates a small wave of magic that directly affects Arua, so Kai assumes she has been healed and places her back on the ground to rest. Then, he hears the sound of orgs. They had arrived and were already causing chaos among the coral people at the valley's entrance. Ketchak tries to protect his lord while cursing the pigs in every name possible. A little girl was in danger and about to be struck by a giant pig, until Kai steps in to stab the enemy in the chest, ending its life on the spot. Immediately, the corals who witnessed the scene thank the intervention of the great god of arbitration, while Kai watches the scene of destruction and death. With anger in his expression, he approaches some orgs and demands to know their business there. In their language, one of the pigs tells the boy to stay out of it, and a crest lights up on the beast's face as it speaks. Suddenly, a voice inside Kai tells him to kill the orgs and make them pay for what they did with blood, instilling fear in the enemies. Kai assumes it is the voice of the valley god, and indeed, the tree's tombstone was emitting a strange bluish energy, which makes him even more certain of this theory. The human decides to follow what was said and prepares to instill fear in the enemies. Similarly, Porek steps up to join the battle, as he also bears a divine crest and can be useful. According to the chief, the coral people of Hachel village swear devotion to both the valley god and the god of arbitration, so they must fight this battle, which is also theirs. Then, the orgs see that Kai has a blessing and wonder if it could be the blessing of the valley, which terrifies them. Nevertheless, their leader demands that the human be killed along with the corals, so his subordinates attack recklessly. Kai responds with his vast ability by finishing 2 pigs with just 1 strike each. When the third charges at the boy, Porek shows his skill and subdues the monster with his sword, impressing Kai. Despite this, the coral chief makes it clear that this is the extent of the combat techniques his species can perform. From now on, Kai must resolve the situation. Thus, the god of arbitration emanates his crest, takes a sword from one of the orgs, and slowly approaches the rival leader. Since the giant pig has contaminated this valley, Kai cannot allow it to leave alive. The org tries an excuse, arguing that this is not a matter for humans, but between corals and orgs. However, Kai makes it clear that this matter is also his, as these monsters entered the valley without permission. The org farts in fear and promises to retreat immediately, but it's already too late. Exuding a bluish energy, the god of arbitration announces that he will kill the pig for the peace of the valley. The org sees the image of the valley god manifesting from the human's energy, which makes him sit on the ground out of sheer terror and beg for his life. However, his plan was only to create a diversion to attack Kai at the right moment, which he manages to do. But Kai cuts the beast's arm using magic, as if it were a blade in his right hand. Seeing this scene, the corals go into shock and try to understand what happened. Despite the severe injury, the org does not give up the attack, so Kai announces that the enemy must learn from its own blood. With his hand imbued with magic, the boy shreds the monster's chest while repeating the words about instilling fear in the opponents. In that motion, Kai pierces the creature's chest until he rips out its heart, and that convinces Ketchak that this is indeed the valley god intervening in the situation. Similarly, Porek recognizes the blue flames that burn his eyes anywhere, those eyes that the god took without pity, but that are also capable of granting mercy by carrying the scale of life. The god of justice who has looked after the world since the era of the gods. And that is his divine stone. Kai looks around, slightly confused, as his allies begin to sheath their weapons. That's when it hits him, he's just killed a blessed one for the first time. The corals begin chanting in their own language, and their leader steps forward to translate. They're rejoicing because Kai is about to claim the blessing of the Great Boar. Those who consume the divine stone of a blessed one absorb the power of the earth god and inherit his blessing. Though no one can be protected by more than one god at a time, a person can consume the power of multiple gods and use it to grow stronger and protect this valley. So, with humility, Kai decides to share the divine stone with Porek, who can hardly believe he's being given the chance. Kai tells him that he played a part in all of this and deserves his share. Porek thanks him, drinks without hesitation, and the liquid turns his eyes unnaturally black, a mark of its power. As for Kai, he watches a blue energy rise from his back, energy Porek recognizes as the earth god. When a blessed one dies, their god's spirit returns to its tomb. And now, Kai feels a sharp, searing pain in his chest right where his own divine stone rests. Porek suspects it's a side effect of consuming another blessed stone. Though he's clearly in agony, Kai pushes himself to his feet and tells everyone to stay away from the valley. As he leaps from the cliff, a memory strikes, a terrifying scene from his childhood. A massive fire, people holding him tight, a ruined city overrun with lifeless flowers and corpses. Then, out of nowhere, a gun-wielding monkey stepped into his path, threatening him. Kai wakes with a jolt, back in bed, and gets an even bigger shock when he realizes Aru is lying under his blanket. Naturally, he freaks out. He didn't even have a blanket before. She calmly explains that she covered him up, he couldn't afford to catch a cold. Aru was offered to the god so that Kai could hear the plea of the Hakar people. From now on, it's her role to stay by the god's side. Kai immediately tells her to go back to her people, but she insists she can't. Her grandfather warned that disaster would fall on them all if she returned, and besides, Kai saved her life. Now, she feels she would die without him, so she's chosen to serve this god forever. Kai clearly doesn't like the idea, but when he notices the sky getting lighter, he realizes it's already morning and rushes off toward the village. Climbing the ridge, he finds the entire Coral tribe waiting. Their leader bows deeply, thanking the god of arbitration for bringing justice to those who wronged them. From now on, they'll dedicate themselves to this deity. Kai repeats that he has nothing to do with it, but Porek reminds him that their homeland is still under attack by the orgs, and that's why the Corals became nomads. Temporarily or not, their leader begs the god to grant them refuge in the valley. With no escape from this delicate discussion, Kai agrees they can do what they want, as long as they stay out of the valley. With that, he turns to leave, but Porek asks for one last word. Later, back at the village of the persecuted, Kai is greeted by an angry Jose. He's late for training. She demands an explanation, and he plays it off, saying he overslept. Not entirely buying it, she starts the session already ticked off and lands a hit on him without warning. He narrowly dodges. Not far away, Manso and the other boys are exhausted from tilling the fields outside the village wall. That's when Lord Vezin shows up, asking about Kai. Manso tells him the boys at the castle, handling supply storage. Wasting no time, the lord of the territory personally challenges Kai to a mock battle. After all, the young man had made a name for himself when he defended Lady Jose during the skirmish in Eda village. Honestly, the last thing Kai wanted was attention, and now even the lord of the land had his eye on him. As Master Basco hands Kai his weapon, he warns the boy not to resort to cheap tricks. Even if things get desperate, it could offend the lord unnecessarily. Moloch Vezin says he's heard the stories, how Kai managed to fend off a pack of monkeys. Now he wants to see what the boy's really made of. But no need to worry, the lord has no intention of killing him. Kai recalls the last thing Porek told him, to hide the fact that he's blessed. Since he only recently inherited his god's protection, he'd be easy prey for other gods until he learned to wield his power. With that in mind, Kai decides to hold back as much as possible, suppressing his strength to keep his crest from appearing. And so, the duel begins. The two fighters touch weapons in the center of the makeshift ring. Without delay, Moloch launches a heavy strike. It catches Kai off guard. He dodges, but a barrage of attacks follows, forcing him onto the defensive. The pressure is so intense that Kai's crest appears on his face. Desperate to hide it, he drops his head. Seeing the boy slouched and seemingly defeated, Vezin mutters that he clearly overestimated him. But when Kai evades the next blow, he realizes the facial mark has vanished. That gives him just enough confidence to push back. Moloch is pleased. He wants that fire in the boy's eyes. He demands Kai use it to raise the stakes. Leading by example, the hulking lord intensifies his assault. Kai counters quickly with a strike to his opponent's waist, but Moloch swings his arm down hard, snapping the boy's staff in two. Now disarmed, Kai doesn't back down. Far from it. With nothing but his bare hands, he grabs Vezin's leg, squeezing so hard that the man drops his weapon. But the lord retaliates with a crushing knee to the stomach, hurling the boy back. Blood pours from Kai's nose, visible to everyone watching. Elsa is frozen in shock at the damage he's taken. In the end, that turned out to be the final blow that ended the fight. Bleeding, on his knees, and completely drained, Kai could barely stay upright when Moloch Vezin let out a hearty laugh and declared with genuine amusement that he liked the kid. Then, lifting him up with his own hands, he announced that starting tomorrow, he'd be training the boy himself. Lady Jose couldn't believe Kai had held his own so well against her father, and even Alha admitted that was way beyond what anyone would expect from a mere foot soldier. Moments later, Manso arrived with the gang, all of them laughing about the beating their friend had taken. Meanwhile, Elsa remembered the day Kai swore he'd grow stronger, and after witnessing that battle, something about it stirred her heart. Later that night, Kai got out of bed and ran joyfully toward the valley. Jose and Moloch had been taking up all of his time lately, and now finally he had a moment to slip away. When he arrived, he noticed a lit cabin and immediately assumed the Corals had entered the valley without his permission. But when he peeked inside, he saw Arua, casually going about her evening in the newly built hut. She'd put it all together herself for her god and hoped he'd be pleased. Though Kai seemed grateful, he held firm in his decision to send her back to her homeland. Still, the girl did everything she could to win over her favorite deity, offering him all kinds of delicious food. And with his stomach growling, there wasn't much Kai could do but give in at least for now. Without hesitation, he dove into the food and devoured it like he hadn't eaten in days. When Aru offered him more, he didn't think twice. He accepted, his eyes landing on a tray with a beautifully fried lobster. He couldn't lie back in his village, he never ate this well. The joy on his face said it all. The next day, when he returned to the village, Kai was served a slightly larger portion for lunch. A few of the guys grumbled that he got more than they did, but the cook reminded them that they'd been slacking in the fields last time. If they wanted more food, they'd have to earn it. Manso joked that spring had truly come for his buddy, and all the attention Kai was getting clearly annoyed him. He kept grumbling at anyone who teased him in public. Watching it unfold, Elsa got distracted and accidentally overfilled a man's plate. Surprised, he asked what she felt for him since it wasn't every day he got that much food. That night, Kai returned to the land he was meant to protect and found Aru there again, marking another evening in his double life. By early morning, the god of arbitration was already sparring with Lady Jose, and as daylight replaced the stars, Kai was back in the valley, alongside his unusual companion. Days passed in that same rhythm. Night after night, Kai worked tirelessly to improve the valley and its surroundings, now home to the Corals, who worshipped the god of arbitration with deep respect and reverence. Then one day, the villagers were struggling to move a massive boulder that blocked their path. Even with a dozen people, the thing wouldn't budge. That's when Moloch Vezin decided to step in personally, and to everyone's shock, he managed to lift and remove the stone using nothing but brute strength. Afterward, he declared that the village's crops would flourish even more, and people stood in awe of his raw power. Later, Kai returned and tried to revive a flower using his blessing but failed miserably. Frustrated, he realized just how much he still had to learn. The next afternoon, Elsa was happily working in the fields when Kai approached and asked what had her smiling like that. She replied that it was nothing special, just that the crops were blooming beautifully this year. Kai had never really thought about it, but now that he looked closer, it was breathtaking. Elsa explained that the flowers had been grown from seeds they'd brought from their old village. When their home was burned down, they had at least managed to save those flowers one small piece of beauty from a place that no longer existed. That brought back a memory for Kai. Both of them were from Lag Village. Elsa scolded him for forgetting something so basic, but he argued that he had been just a child when the fire happened. Setting that aside, Elsa said she was glad he was getting more recognition these days, even admiration from the tribal chief. Kai, ever humble, admitted he still had a long way to go. He needed to grow stronger, especially since someone like him without a family always had to prove themselves. He had friends like Manso and the others, sure, but deep down, he always felt he had to push harder than anyone else. Elsa reminded him that he'd said something similar once before back when he cried alone. Those were dark and difficult days in Lag Village. Kai had been isolated, head down, surrounded by hopelessness. One night, a giant monkey attacked a group of villagers, claiming the land as its territory. And despite being just a child, Kai stood in front of the creature, trying to fight it off. He clung to its leg with everything he had, tears streaming down his face like he had nothing left to lose. As the two recalled that moment, a shared sorrow clouded their expressions. Elsa had thought they were doomed, but then Moloch Vezin appeared and struck the beast down. In the aftermath of that horrific scene, while the wounded were tended to by the dirty and starving villagers, Moloch stood over the monster's corpse in silence. Kai, wiping blood from his nose, looked around and swore by everything sacred that one day he'd grow strong. The frustration in his heart was unbearable. He'd seen his people dead or barely clinging to life, and there was nothing he could do to change it. That was the day the boy made a promise that would reshape his entire view of the world and how he would live from that moment on. Funny thing is, Kai had nearly forgotten that day. He even laughed a little. What kind of kid makes a vow like that at such a young age? But Elsa remembered. He protected his people back then, and he's never changed since. At night, the territorial clash between the demi-humans rages on. A heavily armored orc takes down a monkey-like beast, only to be attacked by another, this one, a blessed warrior. With the crest branded across its face, the simian charges at the orc, but is effortlessly beheaded in a single swing. With that done, the orc glances around at the dozens of bodies scattered across the battlefield. His subordinates erupt, chanting Adarakan's name with fervor. Lifting his blood-soaked axe high, he declares that the fate of the orcs lies in that accursed valley. Meanwhile, in their newfound favorite spot, Kai and Aru enjoyed yet another peaceful evening in that sacred place. The next day, at a village warehouse, the boy picks up a grain from the ground and wonders if he could cook it to shape into rice balls. Suddenly, Elsa shows up, curious about what a rice ball is, but the boy can't really explain it. Truth is, he's never had one himself, if it's even real food. Still, he says he'd like to try one someday, if he ever gets the chance. Manso arrives soon after, barking at Kai to hurry up and bring that sack already. Everyone else is working, and he's just stalling. So, the boy gets back to work. We then see Moloch Vezin giving orders. The job has to be finished before the inspector shows up. Olha asks if all this is really necessary after all. It might be fine if this were a valuable local specialty, but surely giving away a portion of the grain isn't a big deal. His father explains that the village's food stores are running low, and they can't afford to lose such a critical supply. But the son insists the villagers will be fine, they're strong. In fact, he believes the village should be offering gifts to the central region to gain favor. Moloch, however, isn't willing to risk his people's well-being for political clout. As he puts it, the villagers are Moloch's own children. Meanwhile, Kai's fellow workers are nervously awaiting the inspector's arrival from the capital. They even consider hiding their food just in case they're left with nothing. Not far from there, Kai asks if this inspector is also one of the blessed. Manso confirms that he is, and adds that, according to rumors, the man's divine crest surpasses even that of Moloch Vezin. Supposedly, this power is used to protect the unified kingdom's capital in the central region. Some time later, the long-awaited moment arrives. A carriage riddled with arrows rolls into the village of the persecuted. The village chief goes to welcome Lord Inspector Gandalf. Before stepping out, the inspector complains about the number of demi-humans around and grumbles that they were attacked by 10 monkeys, though, of course, he claims to have scared them all off himself. Finally, someone opens the carriage door. The inspector steps out, wearing a skeptical expression, and immediately asks if Jose is that famous white princess from the Lag village that everyone talks about. He remarks that her father must take very good care of her for her skin to be so untouched by the sun. Jose responds that she prepares herself to fight if necessary, even if she's a woman. Gandalf dismisses that, saying women should stay quietly at home and focus on becoming the wife of some nobleman. Jose lowers her head. Gandalf then reminds them that Lag Village should be taking its duty of repelling demi-humans more seriously. With the introductions out of the way, the carriage is pulled inside the village. A masked man with blood-soaked clothes walks beside it. Moloch asks if he's part of the inspector's group. The man removes his mask and says he was sent by the Monastery of Mass. His name is Nada. Without delay, Lord Inspector Gandil is taken to the warehouse. He quickly concludes that the food reserves are indeed very low, probably because Moloch Vezin isn't training hard enough to support the village. Jose considers speaking up to defend her father, but Moloch stops her and simply apologizes. Gandil then claims that some remote villages have been hiding the true size of their harvests. Vezin denies it outright, saying he'd never do such a thing. The poor harvest is just a result of bad weather. The inspector sighs and says, given the situation, he might have to remain in the village for a few days before traveling back. The hosts, like it or not, are forced to accommodate the man and offer him hospitality. Later, alone with her father, Jose vents about the little twerp who has the nerve to demand luxury while staying in the village. She seethes, recalling how he said women should stay quiet at home. Moloch gently reminds her not to speak about Lord Gandil like that. He represents the king wherever he goes. Whether they like it or not, Lag Village is part of the unified kingdom, and they have duties to the crown. In the sparse farmlands of Lag Village, the monk Nada uses his powers to aid the crops. Kai approaches him, grateful for the help. As they talk, Kai points out that the inside of Nada's robe is stained. The monk seems surprised he hadn't noticed, but doesn't explain the reason. Instead, he brings up something else. He knows Kai is the boy who became powerful after eating a bunch of divine stones. And in that sense, he says, they're the same. At the monastery, Nada also consumes divine stones as part of his training. He then reveals his crest etched into his face, but says it wasn't granted by any god. According to him, divine crests can be earned simply through hard training and consuming enough divine stones. Speaking of the divine, Gandil demands to be treated like a god in the village. He's served a grand feast just for himself, even though the village is facing serious food shortages, and even the villagers couldn't dream of eating a meal like that. Gandil, of course, sees himself as worthy of this special comfort, and takes great pleasure in eating right in front of the servants. Meanwhile, during the villagers' own meager meal, three friends grumble that they're having to eat less because of that gluttonous frog-faced bastard. Around the same time, Moloch learns from Nada that a group of orcs larger than usual is approaching the region. However, the monk doesn't believe it's an invasion. Rather, he thinks they're coming for some unknown purpose. He plans to investigate it himself, but admits he doesn't know this remote area very well. He asks the tribal chief for help. Moloch agrees to assign a few people to accompany the monk from the mass monastery. That night, Kai returns to the valley. Aru pleads with him to stay longer than he has been lately, but Kai reminds her he's been assigned to investigate alongside a foreign monk. The girl sadly senses that her god may never return to this place, but he gently reminds her that the blessed have a duty to the land, and that duty means he must return to protect this valley. After that, Kai pays a visit to Porak, who believes the new gang of orgs roaming the area is searching for the other allies defeated right here by the god of arbitration. The leader of the Korals is worried about this hostile movement around the valley, but Kai assures him he's ready to take action if it comes to that. At the break of dawn the next day, while Gandil is sleeping like a baby, the investigation team departs the village to carry out their mission. From atop the wall, Alha questions his father's decision to send Jose on the expedition. The village chief admits it was supposed to be his son's task, but for now, the priority is tracking down the monkeys who attacked the inspector. Besides, Kai is with them, so things should be fine. As a matter of fact, Elsa catches up with the Blessed One right as he's leaving the village, surprising him with a gift, rice balls. She tried to recreate what she understood to be the dish they had been talking about the other day by cooking a bit of wheat and shaping it into round balls. The moment Kai receives the food, he's instantly reminded of his mother, though it's been years since he last thought about her. Returning to the group, he notes the rice should be whiter, and maybe the grains are supposed to be wrapped in something black. Further along the journey, after some walking, the group takes a break. While Nada studies the regional map to get his bearings, Jose asks Kai if he agrees with Inspector Gandil's opinion that women should be submissive. But since the boy clearly doesn't understand what she's talking about, she drops the subject. Just then, one of the scouts returns to report a gruesome scene, a bloody clash between monkeys and orgs that ended in a pile of corpses. Nada assumes the orgs they're investigating must have fought that particular group of monkeys. A man from Lagu notes that there are way more monkey corpses than org ones, implying a significant power difference between the factions. The monk adds that the orgs could pose a much bigger threat if they're being led by someone powerful. Kai doesn't really get what these pigs are after, but Jose recalls what Lord Nada said to her father in yesterday's meeting, that he's after the same thing the orgs are chasing. Just then, the monk himself steps in to reveal there's a prophecy about a powerful god destined to appear in this distant land, a god who must not be ignored. The monk's mission is to investigate the orgs to uncover this god and its tomb, because whichever species claims this entity will gain tremendous power. That kind of force must not fall into demi-human hands. Additionally, Mass Envoy has been tasked with adding this god to the pantheon of the unified kingdom. When Kai asks what kind of god they're talking about, Nada recalls what the high priest from his monastery once said about the prophecy. A wild spirit has awakened one that refuses to bow to distant lands. Its power soars through the sky like a bird in flight. Its nature is both light and dark, good and evil, and for that, it must be feared and respected. Kai wonders if this awakened god could be the same god of the valley, because if it is, then this monk is actually looking for him. But setting that aside, he notes that these orgs are far stronger than the ones he fought back in the valley. Later on, the expedition stumbles upon a valley that seems to have been attacked by orgs, judging by the damage to its structures. They approach the tribe to assess the situation up close and spot several Yuzels dead. This race was known for being incredibly peaceful. Even worse, their horns had been cut off. Kai identifies a blood-stained org axe nearby, prompting the group to go on high alert. One of the soldiers suggests retreating, but Lady Jose refuses to abandon any possible survivors that might be hiding from the invaders. So, Nada decides to stay behind and investigate the village alone, while the rest of the team searches for survivors. Manso sends Kai to accompany the monk. Back with Jose's team, they fail to find a single living Yuzel. They reach a part of the tribe that hasn't been destroyed, which strikes them as odd. If the orgs were responsible, they likely wouldn't have left anything standing. Jose spots blood on the ground and guesses a wounded villager might have taken shelter inside one of the houses. Meanwhile, Kai and Nada continue their investigation through the village's central structure. The monk casts a fire spell, explaining that orgs fear the flame. Not long after, they come across a tombstone. Back to Jose, she tries to coax a possible survivor out of one of the houses. The door slowly creaks open and a dead org collapses out. Nada explains that this is the tomb of the village's earth god. Since he's not a blessed one, he can't read the inscription, but luckily, he has a book to help translate. According to the text, the god's name is Nazalkazil. Circling around the tombstone, Kai finds a dead Yuzel woman and carries her back to the rest of the group, where other bodies have been gathered, including 3 fallen orgs that were also discovered. Since the village wasn't completely destroyed, Lord Nada doubts they were hit by the org's main force. Judging by the woman's attire, she might have been the blessed lady of her people. Kai points out that Lady Jose is also a blessed woman, although it's uncommon for a lady to hold such a title in these lands. Nada concludes that the Yuzel woman's fatal wound came from an org axe. Kalik blurts out that a woman, even a blessed one, would stand no chance against a brute like that. Jose is clearly annoyed by the comment. However, when the monk examines the sword recovered from the woman, he realizes the wounds on all the dead orgs were caused by her. Jose is stunned that the blessed woman managed to defeat those enemies on her own. Nada remarks that Yuzel horns sell for a great price, so that must be what the invaders were really after. According to him, the Yuzels who were found dead had been attacked first, and the elder woman had heard their screams and rushed to help. Unable to bear the thought of more of her people's blood being spilled, she stood as a shield so the others could escape. That's why there's no one left in this village. Even so, Kalik insisted she acted recklessly after all. The difference in physical strength and combat ability between orgs and Yuzels is massive. Even Jose believed the leader should have known she didn't stand a chance. But Nada argued that she overcame that difference out of love for her people. And to him, that's exactly the kind of quality every blessed one should have. In Kai's opinion, being truly blessed means never backing down from an enemy, no matter how powerful they are. Hearing that, Kalik felt ashamed and apologized for what he said. while Jose was visibly moved by the thought that one day she might become someone like the elder of the Yusels. After burying the fallen villagers with dignity, the monk noted that the tribe's leader didn't possess a divine stone. That likely meant her blessing had already been passed on to someone else. Still, her earth god wasn't linked to the one he was searching for. At the very least, Nada figured out that the main group of orgs was elsewhere. Looking at the map, he pointed out that from the battlefield where the monkeys and orgs clashed, the trail split in two. One path led to this village, where rogue orgs from the battalion had turned up. That meant the main force had taken the other path, the one leading into the forest, where the god's tombstone was probably located. As soon as he realized that the envoy from Mass was talking about the valley, Kai immediately volunteered to go ahead and clear the way if it meant helping the corals sooner. He wouldn't hesitate. Speaking of them, Porek had just been informed by Ketchak about the org's approach. So, despite his age, he decided to gather a few men to assess the danger up close. He might be old, but he refused to sit back and do nothing while his people were under threat. Meanwhile, Kai raced toward the valley. At the same time, a squad from Lag ventures deep into the forest, tracking the monkeys approaching the village. When they spot smoke that could signal enemy presence, one of the soldiers suggests they turn back, but led by Olha, the Blessed, they press on to observe the enemy's movements more closely. From the looks of it, the monkeys were preparing to build a fortress right there, aiming to choke off the humans' territory. And given the absurd number of them, it would take a full battalion to take them head-on. Even so, Olha knows that if they don't take action against the inspector's attackers, the honor of Lag Village will be forever tarnished. But with pressure mounting from Master Basco and the other men, the commander reluctantly agrees to retreat for now. Back in the village, people wonder whether Kai has found the main group of orgs. Without knowing where the monsters went, there's nothing they can do. Manso points out that, either way, they can't leave until Kai returns. Worried, Lady Jose stands up and says she should have gone with the boy. She even considers chasing after him, but Nada convinces her to place her faith in him instead. All they can do now is trust and hope he returns safely. In fact, Nada reassures her, Kai is probably safer than any of them imagine. And with that, he heads out to fulfill his duty as a priest offering prayers in this time of uncertainty. Nada climbs the long stairway to the top of a mountain, where he sits in meditation, reflecting on the situation. Deep in thought, he admits to himself that he always knew Kai would show him the way. With a spell, the monk casts two magical eyes toward the forest. Meanwhile, Kai is racing through the woods. At one point, he stumbles upon a trail of org footprints stamped all over the dirt path clearly. There are many, and they're heading straight for the valley. Suddenly, a rustling sound from a nearby bush grabs his attention. He draws his sword, ready to strike. In an instant, someone lunges at him, but it turns out to be Ketchak on lookout, who mistook him for the enemy. Kai is stunned to see members of the Coral tribe emerging from behind the trees. Lord Porek, their leader, is surprised Kai arrived so quickly. The Corals begin walking alongside the Blessed One, and Porek explains that the moment they sensed the orgs approaching, they rushed over to monitor their movements. Grateful but cautious, Kai thanks them for their courage, but insists they stay out of the coming battle. He intends to handle this on his own. Ketchak, however, fires back with frustration. They have every reason to defend the valley. It's where they built their homes, their lives. Porek adds that the Corals serve the god of the valley, and they wish to help in any way they can, even if it's just a little. Every effort counts in restoring peace and waking up their people's spirit. Hearing this, Kai finally agrees to accept their aid. Just then, the sound of the orgs and their massive tools begins to echo through the forest. The Corals watch in horror as enormous pig-like creatures bulldoze everything in their path like living tractors. Staring at the enemy horde, Porek urges caution, but Kai says they don't have time for that. Out of nowhere, a Durakan, the leader of the orgs, spots his enemies hiding in the trees. Back in Lag Village, Inspector Lord Gandalf is giving the poor maids a hard time. Acting like a spoiled brat, the short man throws his plate to the ground mid-meal, chewing with his mouth open and mocking the local cuisine as if it wasn't refined enough for his royal taste buds. According to him, the food isn't just for his pleasure, it's a test of loyalty to the king. Then, captivated by Elsa's beauty as she picks up the food he tossed, Gandalf asks her name. She answers, of course, and he demands more wine to fill his empty cup. Elsa freezes. Just one look at his disgusting face was enough to tell she was dealing with a man full of bad intentions. To ease the tension, another maid named Lady Adelia steps in, refills his plate, and pours the wine. Later, outside, Elsa thanks Adelia. The older woman tries to encourage her, sensing that Elsa's sorrow runs so deep, not even the return of the one she loves has managed to lift her spirit. In the middle of all that, Alha storms in, furious, with Master Basco close behind, demanding to see his father. Adelia calls out to her husband, but Basco warns he doesn't have time to talk, there's too much work ahead. Meanwhile, near the valley, Kai is already clashing with the orgs. After sprinting to the right distance, he manages to skewer his first enemy with a spear. A second org rushes him from behind, but before it can strike, Ketchak stabs it in the back with his dagger. Kai praises him, and Ketchak smirks, saying he'd never lose to a short god. Moments later, the ground is littered with fallen orgs. The survivors watch in horror, beginning to retreat in fear, while the god of arbitration shouts that he won't let any of them cross into the valley. And finally, emerging from the ranks, comes the biggest and strongest of all the orgs. Towering above the others in a crimson suit of armor, he radiates a terrifying presence. This is a Durakan. He steps forward and reveals a blessed mark on his face. Porek instantly recognizes it, it might be one of the Rigderos. Among the fiercest orgs, 6 warriors stand above the rest, blessed by the gods of the earth and born of the northern tribes. These are the Rigderos. Realizing what they're up against now, Kai tells the Korals to stand back, then readies his full power to face the enemy chief. At that moment, the magical eyes of Monk Nada reach the valley's edge. He had known this would be a gamble, but he never imagined his target would be this close. One way or another, he's finally found him. Upon seeing the divine crest on such a small boy, a Durakan bows his head and concludes that Kai's predecessor must be dead. It had been a long time since the org had heard anything about him. So, he offers thanks to the bone chewers who were chasing the Korals, because it was thanks to them that the org leader found Kai. Porek figures out that these bone chewers must be the orgs Kai killed earlier, which means a Durakan tracked them all the way to the valley. Inside the human boy's soul, that voice kept repeating over and over that he had to kill these enemies. And if there's one thing Kai is sure of, it's that the voice is right this time. That's why he charges at the enemy leader, who uses his armor to stop the tip of the human's spear. In response, the org swings his steel axe, but the attack is too slow to catch his nimble opponent. Kai tries to get in close, but the pig is so massive, he easily swats the boy away. Seeing no other option, Kai switches to a smarter tactic. He slips between the beast's legs and makes it to his back. Once he reaches the most vulnerable part of the creature's body, he thrusts his spear. But the beast's skin is like armor, it's so tough, it shatters the weapon. Even so, Kai doesn't give up. After dodging another heavy blow, he kicks the broken spearhead that's still embedded in the pig's back, driving it in deeper, and finally, it does some real damage. The Korals cheer as if Kai had already won, but then, a Durakan yanks the spear from his body, and his flesh begins to regenerate instantly. With that, he grabs the boy by the neck and prepares to end the fight. Porek watches, stunned. Not even a blessed one could heal that fast. A chilling thought crosses his mind, what if a Durakan is immortal? The monster lifts Kai into the air and sneers that the god of the valley has fallen far to name this runt as his successor. And just as the human's body starts to go limp, a Durakan grins. Meanwhile, across the valley, Aru is busy finishing a piece of clothing, hoping to get it done before her god returns home. A Durakan revels in his victory and swears he'll raise the entire valley once Kai is dead. Back in the village, the Korals carry on with their daily lives. A few warriors head out, determined to keep the women and children from being slaughtered along with everything else that matters to their people. With the image of his village in mind, Kai clenches his teeth. He won't let that happen. Channeling a powerful fire spell, he scorches a Durakan's hand until the beast is forced to release him. Kai lands on his feet, he's back in the fight. The Korals are in awe. The boy can use magic. The org chieftain laughs, amused that such a tiny thing thinks magic will save him. But when Kai turns up the intensity, flames erupt around a Durakan, and the tides begin to shift. The orgs surrounding them grow anxious. Their leader might actually lose. But a Durakan shields himself with his armor and counters with a well-placed kick that sends Kai flying. Ketchak watches, stunned. How did he shake off all that fire? Anirecap explains it's the spirit of his god. It lives within him. From afar, Nada observes in silence. He reflects that the gods always protect their vessels, those who carry their blessings. And for gods familiar with the natural laws of this world, shielding a blessed one from divine powers is a trivial task. Unfazed by everything Kai has thrown at him, Anirecap steps forward once more. Kai, now holding his sword, knows the truth. This pig's hide is absurdly thick. Any damage he inflicts heals instantly. Magic isn't working either. In short, he's out of ideas. Anirecap retrieves his axe and charges. Far away, in the fields outside Lag village, Elsa spots a withered flower. She wonders, is Kai really okay? Nearby, two men prepare for the looming battle against the invading apes. Overhead, the sky darkens. A storm brews. Kai dodges the next attack, but when he counters with his sword, it's useless. The blade fails to pierce the skin, and worse, it shatters. He crashes to the ground, completely disarmed. His rice balls spill from his pouch. When he tries to stand, he realizes he's out of strength. Ketchak laments how vast the power gap between them is. Nada, the monk, fears the god of earth, the one he once encountered, may have entrusted his strength to these semi-humans. Anirecap keeps mocking the god of the valley for choosing such a weak representative. Meanwhile, Kai can only think one thing: if I lose, the corals are doomed. Then he sees the rice balls scattered across the dirt. And that simple image triggers a flood of memories. One by one, they rush through his mind until he reaches the moment when Elsa gave them to him, right before his journey began. With all of this spinning in his head, Kai realizes there's still something he can do. He puts two of the rice balls back into his pouch. Anirecap steps on the remaining ones and sneers. "What's this? You running away now, kid?" Kai looks him in the eye. "To defeat a god's blessing," he says, "you have to go beyond the natural laws of this world. Atoms, molecules, whatever it is, you always take one step further." All around, the orcs begin chanting Anirecap's name. Their leader raises his axe high and declares that the blessing and the power of the valley will belong to the orcs for their prosperity. But before the axe can fall, Kai moves. With a burst of supernatural energy, he draws his spectral blade and slices clean through the monster's arm. Everyone, both orcs and corals, freeze in shock. None of them can believe the aura now radiating from the young Kai. Furious, Anirecap charges. Kai strikes once, to shatter the beast's chestplate. Then again, with a deep slash across the face. The mighty, blessed orc collapses. Sweating, Nada withdraws his enchanted eyes. He's speechless. That boy, he's using divine powers only spoken of in ancient legend. This story, without a doubt, is just getting started. In the village of Lag, Manso watches the skies darken as the rain draws near. Just then, Lady Jose rises to her feet, takes a few unsteady steps, and collapses hard onto the ground. As the men rush to help the chief's daughter, they spot a wound on her leg. Meanwhile, Kai grabs Anirecap's magical essence and drinks it down to absorb his power. The orcs nearby are thrown into a panic as the human is suddenly engulfed by a surge of blue energy, unleashing a roaring gust of wind. The pigs scatter in every direction, and once the whirlwind fades, Kai loses consciousness. At that very moment, a swirl of red and blue magic bursts from beneath the earth, rising upward, drawn to the sky above. Some time later, the valley's guardian awakens, struggling to make sense of what just happened. Still dazed, Ketchak explains that Kai ate the divine stone of the armored warrior, which triggered an extraordinary gust of wind. Lord Porrick adds that someone as strong as Anirecap must also have a powerful earth god behind him. But Kai had taken his divine stone, severing Anirecap's connection to his god, and the event they just witnessed might very well have been that god's cry of anguish. Shortly after, while rinsing off in a river, Kai mentions that he felt an unpleasant gaze during the battle, as if someone or something was watching them. Porrick says he sensed it too, but brushed it off since there didn't seem to be any hostility. With that, the leader of the corals announces that they'll be heading back to the valley. Now alone, Kai hears his stomach growl. He takes out the rice balls and thanks Elsa for making them. After eating, he rejoins his companions and is immediately informed that Lady Jose has collapsed. Without hesitation, he rushes to her side and learns that she passed out from a high fever. There's a strange mark on her calf that looks like a wound, but no one knows what it means. Monk Nada asks Kai how things went with the orgs. Kai explains that by the time he found them, the pigs had already been wiped out by someone else. Among the bodies was an org in armor, probably a captain, and it seems the survivors fled. After hearing this, the monk declares that Jose must be taken back to the village as a priority. And so, Lag's warriors return, carrying the chief's daughter on a stretcher. Along the way, Nada notices blood on Kai's clothes. Kai lies, saying it must have splashed on him while he was running through a pool of it. As they near the village, they realize there was an attack by monkeys while they were away. Manso sends Kai ahead to scout the area before they bring Jose in. Inside the wooden wall, the destruction is clear. The village was ravaged. Kai finds Master Basco, who confirms the monkeys launched a massive assault with overwhelming numbers. They were only driven back thanks to the power of the Earth Lord. Even so, the village suffered greatly, especially from the monkeys' skilled stone throwers. Kai hurries to the village's small stone fort, where peasants unable to fight have taken refuge alongside the wounded. He shouts Elsa's name at the top of his lungs and she responds. When they finally reunite, their smiles are wide and sincere. At the same time, Moloch Vezin spots his daughter and notices the mark on her leg is identical to the one Lord Alha now bears. Just like Jose, Lord Alha is bedridden and suffering. Moloch is convinced the monkeys are behind whatever is happening to their children. Meanwhile, scouts from Lag discover even more monkey reinforcements gathering in the forest. Another attack seems imminent. Back inside the fortress, Kai helps Elsa tend to an injured woman, who had taken shelter there with her mother and younger sister after the village was destroyed. She admits she was terrified, but remembering Kai's face helped her feel a little calmer. Speaking of which, the boy was about to thank her for the rice balls when Manso arrived, saying the Earth Lord wanted to see him. Kai heads straight to Moloch, who gathers from Kai's report that the orgs are no longer a threat. Kai then asks about Jose and Olha, and Nada explains their condition is the result of a curse tied to the tombstones of the Earth Gods. Moloch agrees, saying the monkeys must have orchestrated this, wiping out Lag's defenders so they could destroy the village unopposed. And according to the scouts, the next wave isn't far off. Nada adds that Lord Olha can return to the fight if the curse is lifted, and he's counting on Kai to help him reverse it. For now, Kai will serve as the monk's protector on this critical mission. Moloch announces that the young warrior is heading to the abandoned villages where they tend the tombs monthly. Olha's god is in Elg village, and Hosea's is in Eda village. The leader makes it very clear Lag's survival depends on the success of this mission. Just a little pressure to keep the boy sharp. As they leave the meeting, Kai and Nada run into Lord Inspector Gandil, who as usual is giving the maids a hard time with his entitled demands. Kai can't understand why someone blessed like Gandil isn't helping in the fight. Nada admits he'd like to see that too. Either way, he tells Kai to meet him at the northern gate when he's ready to depart. Kai rushes to a window in the fortress to speak to Elsa. He finally gets the chance to thank her for the rice balls he says they saved him. But he also breaks the news that he has to leave again on another mission. Despite the worry in Elsa's eyes, Kai promises he'll be back soon. And when all this is over, he'll take her somewhere special, where they can eat rice balls together, just the two of them. Soon after, Kai meets up with Nada, who's carrying a bag filled with the tools they'll need to break the curse. Before they leave, the monk shares a bit of his past. He says that behind these walls is the life he once left behind. He was the second son of a poor noble family, studied hard to inherit his family's god, but he wasn't chosen to be blessed. With no real place left at home, he turned to the monastery, where he trained daily and embraced a life full of love, joy, and sometimes sorrow. Still, this is the life they've sworn to protect. And with that, the two set off toward their destiny. After their walk, the pair arrived at Elg village, where the god of Lord Alha's land was worshipped. Nada offered to scout out how many monkey guards were stationed there, so he summoned his magic eyes to do the job. Kai suddenly felt that same eerie sensation he had when he was being watched earlier, but he chose not to mention it to the monk. The monk explained that this ability was called 100 Eyes, a secret technique he'd learned at the monastery. With it, Nada could see anything, from any distance. Using this power, he identified 5 guards stationed at Elg village and quickly moved on to the next step of their mission. Kai, meanwhile, was visibly impressed. Around the tombstone of the Earth God, the 5 monkey sentinels kept close watch, alert to any movement that might hint at danger. But none of them noticed the young warrior from Lag slipping in. He lunged forward, driving his spear through the first guard's neck. The second was pierced in the chest moments later. The third was slapped square in the face, an open-handed blow that left him with the worst injury of the 3. Meanwhile, Monk Nada handled the remaining 2 with ease, knocking them down without breaking a sweat, leaving Kai even more stunned by his power. After the fight ended, Kai's face revealed the mark of his crest, something Nada already suspected, but wanted to see for himself. He knelt before Kai and introduced himself again, this time as Nada, the Seeker of Truth, sent by the Monastery of Mass to uncover the truth about the gods. He asked Kai to lend his powers to help the unified kingdom of man. But Kai reminded him that their first priority was to break Lord Alha's curse. Accepting that, the monk stood and got back to work. He poured a strange liquid over the blood that stained the tombstone and began to wipe it clean. As he did, he explained to Kai that the unified kingdom desperately needed a new, powerful god because it was growing weaker with each passing year. Inspector Gandil was a perfect example. The blessed ones in the central region, who supported the king, had drowned themselves in luxury and abandoned their studies. As a result, the gods who once stood by the throne had grown feeble. If the kingdom still had its old strength, they could have sent an army to reclaim this village, instead of leaving it to the whims of fate. And things were only getting worse. Villages like this one would keep falling into ruin, because a weak kingdom can't protect its own people. Its corrupt government spends all its resources fattening up the royal family and their noble lackeys. Nada's goal, he explained, was to find a god powerful enough to break this cycle and establish a new way to govern. With that, he chanted an incantation and poured Lord Malak Vezin's blood onto the tombstone. The village's god, it seemed, served the god of Lag. The moment the blood touched the stone, it vanished. The dissipation ritual is complete, Nada declared. With their work done, the 2 left Elg village and continued their journey. On the way, Nada shared troubling news. A great shift was coming to the world. The monkeys had tried to take over Lag village by cursing its tombs and weakening its blessed defenders. They'd gone so far as to cripple the land's god, essentially spoiling the very earth they planned to conquer. According to Nada's research, the monkey nation was now under threat. Something or someone had driven them from their homeland, and they were now desperate to find a new one, even if by force. The same applied to the orcs Lag village had been chasing. They, too, were being hunted by strange beings from the north, and they needed the power of a new god to fight back. At this rate, with so many disasters stacking up, the human kingdom, weak as it was, could fall at any moment. After laying out all this context, Nada once again asked Kai to lend his god's strength, for the sake of millions of lives. Suddenly, a voice echoed in Kai's mind, ordering him to kill the monk, over and over. No matter how many times he shook his head, the voice wouldn't stop. He finally told Nada that he needed time to think before making such an important decision. The monk understood and invited Kai to continue the journey with him to Ada village, asking only that he give his answer before they ended this curse. Meanwhile, Lord Alha was suffering terribly, but according to his caretaker, the curse's mark on his body was beginning to fade. At that same moment, Master Basco delivered the news to Moloch, who believed Nada was succeeding in his mission. If his son recovered fully, Lord Vezin believed Lag village would have a real shot at repelling the invasion. Back in Ada village, Kai and Nada cleared the guards along the path and descended to the underground tombstone. The monk began the same dissipation ritual he'd performed at the previous village, and once again, the blood was absorbed into the sacred stone. As he sat alone, Kai reflected on what the monk had told him. His god's power was immense, so much so that Kai wasn't even sure how to wield it. But if it could save the human realm, then maybe it was time to be brave, to prevent other villages from being destroyed like this one. Still, something weighed heavily on him. Why was the valley's god angry? Soon, Nada returned and spoke to him. If Kai joined the kingdom's mausoleum, he'd also gain the favor of the God King, amplifying his power even further. With that kind of strength, he could easily protect Lag village and its people. But Kai remembered his duty to the Korals. The monk, however, demanded that he abandon them if he wished to join mankind. The mausoleum didn't accept devotees who were part beast, part man. Humans are born human, the monk said. and they are tested by the heavens. There is no place for hybrids." Without hesitation, Kai refused. The Blessed Ones were meant to protect the Earth God and all who lived beneath him. To abandon the corals would be a betrayal of that duty. In one last effort, the monk asked what could possibly change his mind. But Kai stood firm. "Nothing," he said. And though Kai had expected anger or confrontation, Nada's face remained calm, just as serene as ever. Meanwhile, the Blessed Apes discover the bodies of their fallen comrades and fly into a state of uncontrollable rage. Kai and Nada begin gathering their things to leave, but their concern about Lag Village only grows. At this point, it may already have been attacked. Kai turns around and urges his companion to return as quickly as possible. But before they can make a move, Massa's envoy drives a blade into the back of the Blessed One. Back in Lag Village, Alha manages to utter a few faint words about the need to defeat the apes, but she still hasn't fully regained consciousness. Jose, on the other hand, grows weaker by the minute, and Moloch Vezin fears that without his children in this fight, the fall of Lag Village may be inevitable. Back to Kai, he drops to his knees in pain as Nada reveals the truth, that God's slaying weapon pierces the defense of the blessed and saps their strength. In other words, resistance is pointless. With rage written all over his face, the monk accuses the blessed boy of using his immense power only to protect his own land and people, instead of helping those who truly need it. According to the monk, the kid should understand just how powerful he really is, because acting without awareness of that power is dangerous. Still, there's something else in the monk's tone: envy. He makes it a point to remind Kai that this miraculous light of his will never belong to someone like him, no matter how much he studies. Worse, Nada grows more aggressive with every passing second. Kai tries to fight back using his crest, but Nada drives the weapon even deeper into his back and prepares to steal the divine stone from the Blessed One. His goal? To transfer Kai's legacy to the unified kingdom for all eternity and to claim that power for himself. But just as he's about to land the final blow, the boy suddenly dodges and strikes back with a desperate kick. It lands, but that's all Kai has left in him. Exhausted and trembling, he collapses to the ground, breathless. A glowing blue energy begins to radiate from the wound on his back. Meanwhile, back in Lag Village, the warriors are setting up defenses. They wonder aloud whether any nearby villages will come to their aid, but it doesn't look promising. Everyone's got their own problems, and reinforcements aren't likely to arrive. Manso chuckles at the grim talk and says that if they fall in this battle, they'll all head to the heavens together and cross the Ispi River side by side. Moloch Vezin doesn't waste any time. He orders everyone to stay sharp, swearing to do whatever it takes to keep the enemy from breaching the walls. But he's honest, there's no guarantee they won't break through. With too few soldiers to defend Lag, he declares that anyone capable of holding a weapon must step forward and prepare for battle. In the infirmary, Lady Adelia comforts the wounded, assuring them they're safe inside the castle walls. Elsa and her sister Lilissa stand beside their mother in this moment of tension. Adelia pleads with them to flee somewhere safe if fighting breaks out again, but Elsa promises to stay by her side if things get worse. Back on the battlefield, Nada tells Kai that everyone can be saved if he's willing to die for them. That, he says, is the only way humanity will ever reclaim its lost power. Kai, already losing patience, admits that maybe the monk is right, but his duty is clear: to protect the valley and its people. Nada insists he must let go of that idea now. But Kai, barely able to lift himself off the ground, summons what strength he has left and grabs his dagger. The monk might not understand, he says, but this power was given to him for a reason: to protect this land and its people. If the boy insists on clinging to that belief, so be it. Nada prepares to finish what he started. Until a monkey leaps out from the forest and attacks them both. At that same moment, Lag Village is bombarded by volleys of rocks slamming into its walls. Master Basco commands his men to stand strong atop the ramparts, while Moloch steps outside the gate, ready to show the monkeys the might of Lag. Across the battlefield, the leader of the monkeys rallies his troops, urging them not to fear the humans. One by one, the simians ignite the pouches on their slings and begin hurling burning stones at the village. Back in the forest, Nada struggles to make sense of what kind of monkey is launching such vicious attacks against him while fending off rapid strikes. Out of nowhere, another monkey lunges at Kai. Despite his weakened state, the boy narrowly escapes death. Then a third creature steps into the fray. It quickly becomes clear that Kai can't handle them all at once, and just when it couldn't get worse, the monkeys reveal their crest marks, proof that this is no ordinary threat. They were the ones who cursed Jose and Alha. Knowing this drives Kai into a searing rage. That fury triggers a surge of glowing blue energy from his wound, and as he rises to his feet, he swears the enemies will pay for what they've done. The monkeys, however, have no intention of waiting for that to happen. One charges with a spear aimed straight at his chest. Kai dodges barely and slips past the next few strikes as well. One of the monkeys eventually knocks him back, but something's changed. Kai's not as frail as he was moments ago. Even after being thrown, he gets up, steady and ready. Still, that wound of his, it's taking too long to heal, thanks to the cursed weapon Nada used. Speaking of the monk, he's nearby, searching for the hidden monkeys. From the shadows, they chant that the deaths of these two will be slow and painful. But Nada isn't about to let go of the god's power he's finally found. Then, just as one monkey reveals itself and lunges forward, Nada dodges swiftly and reveals his own crest. But the attack is overwhelming, and he's taken down, left wide open for a killing blow. And then something unexpected happens. Kai steps in, shielding the monk with his own body to stop the fatal strike. Grateful, or perhaps simply caught off guard, Nada retaliates with a massive fire spell that consumes nearly the entire village. In the aftermath, he and Kai emerge free from the simians. Nada looks at the boy and asks why he saved someone who just tried to kill him. Kai, clearly annoyed, says he didn't even think, he just acted. Nada stares for a moment, and suddenly believes he understands why the god chose this kid to wield such incredible power. Still, even after that fiery blast, the three monkeys are alive and hunting them. Kai groans in pain from his still bleeding wound. Nada calmly says that they're facing three blessed enemies, while he and Kai, just a wounded blessed boy, and a mere monk. Kai scowls, blaming someone in particular for his injuries, and agrees that they're seriously outmatched. Seemingly remorseful, Nada turns to him and says, "If you want to make it back home alive, then listen closely to what I say." At that moment, the monkeys catch the scent of their enemies and begin to approach the house where they're hiding. Kai turns to Nada and asks if he's really going to help him, because if Kai survives this, he might just come back to kill the monk. But Nada doesn't want to think about that right now. All he can focus on is not dying, not until he's seen the true extent of the power that lies within Kai, the seeker of truth. Seconds later, one of the monkeys silently creeps toward the human's hiding place, only to be caught off guard by the Blessed One, who bolts from cover and lures all three enemies away. At a certain point in the chase, Kai stops and looks around. The silence is deafening, the kind that makes it painfully clear the monkeys are lying in wait, ready to strike at any second. Their voices echo between the crumbling walls, already celebrating victory, demanding the divine stone carried by the blessed human. Meanwhile, Nada begins casting the spell of 100 eyes to predict the monkeys' movements. It doesn't take long before he sees one of them sneaking up on Kai from behind. He shouts a warning, and just in time, Kai reacts, fending off the attacker. The other monkeys, stunned that this kid could actually anticipate one of their moves, weave through the rubble in disbelief. Watching Nada scanning the surroundings, Kai starts to trust in his predictions. So when the monk calls out that another attack is coming from the right, Kai instinctively steps away from the wall just as it's smashed through by a monkey. Once the beast is within range, Kai counters with a mana slash that instantly takes its head clean off. Then, Nada comes sprinting toward Kai in a panic, shouting that an enemy is about to strike from above. Instantly, the boy raises his invisible blade to the sky and slices the beast in half, leaving only one monkey still alive. Nada, awestruck, can barely process the surreal power of the god behind this chosen one. The final monkey charges straight at him. Nada tries to defend himself with his staff, but it's not enough. He's pierced by the monkey's spear. The creature, aware that Nada is the eyes of the blessed, mocks him for not even being able to see his own fate. After all, he didn't see this one coming. Still, Kai finishes off the enemy, and now his concern turns to the seeker of truth. During all this, Lord Alha finally regains consciousness and tries to make sense of what happened. The sound of a massive blast from the fortress tells him everything the monkeys have invaded. He tries to get up and rush to help, but a Kiwi stops him. He's still far too weak. Even so, the Lord demands his sword. These beasts, he says, must witness the true power of House Moloch. A Kiwi promises to do everything in his power to support his master. Back in the ruins of the dead village, Kai shows unexpected humility. Instead of seeking revenge, he tends to the wounded monk. But Nada tells him it's no use, the monkeys struck his divine stone with that spear. It looks like his quest for truth ends here, and now, even though that's not what he wanted. Despite everything, Kai believes he can turn this around. He begins casting a healing spell on the monk. Nada, barely believing the miracle taking place, tells him he's something far beyond what any human could handle. To him, it's tragic that a boy like Kai would try to control life and destiny forces that reach far beyond this little valley he swore to protect. Nada's strength begins to fade. He raises one hand toward the sky, confessing his ignorance for not realizing sooner that he could never compare to someone chosen by a powerful god. Still, he takes solace in the fact that he pursued the truth to the very end and found a young man capable of carrying such immense power. Even so, he regrets not being able to see what will happen next, because for him, it all ends now. With death closing in, the monk glimpses the arrival of Ispi Ryo and finally closes his eyes. His life fades away. At that very moment, a torrential storm crashes down from the sky. At the same time, Lady Jose wakes up and realizes she's lying in her father's room. The last thing she remembers is passing out in the Uzel village. That's it. Nothing more. When a Kiwi comes to check on her, another deep rumble shakes the castle. Jose immediately realizes the monkeys are inside. A Kiwi brings a message from Moloch Vezin. If it comes to it, she must flee from Lag village. From atop the wall, Master Basco and his men hold the line, trying to stop the monkeys from climbing over. A Kiwi adds that the lord of this land doesn't want his daughter fighting. But Jose can't help feeling sad even now. Her father still doesn't believe in her military skill, as if being a woman makes her useless. Still, she runs with a Kiwi toward the shelter for women, children, and the wounded. There, she makes a promise House Moloch will fulfill its duty to protect everyone. Her presence alone brings comfort to those terrified by the war. Meanwhile, two men are sent to find Inspector Gandil and get him to safety, but he's vanished from his room. One of them wonders if Gandil joined the fight, but the other knows better. That idiot probably just ran off. Sure enough, Gandil is fleeing as fast as he can, trembling in fear at even the slightest whiff of war. In his panic, he mutters, "Where the hell is that useless Nada when I need him?" Elsewhere, Elsa shows true bravery by feeding the soldiers guarding the walls, boosting morale. As she heads downstairs for more food, she spots Inspector Gandil looking like a scared child caught in the middle of a storm. Impatient and out of his mind, the inspector demands the gates be opened so he can return to the capital. He even forces one of the villagers to open the massive, 66-foot-high gate built to prevent invasions by himself. As if that weren't enough, Gandil completely loses it and spins the gate's crank on his own. When the villager protests, saying Moloch ordered the gate to stay shut, the inspector stabs the man with his dagger, killing him without hesitation. Elsa rushes over to help the villager, only to be taken hostage by Gandil. More people begin to approach, but Gandil doesn't care. He's ready to do whatever it takes to escape this war alive, even if it means spilling more blood on his way out. Suddenly, a carriage from their allies appears through the rain to rescue their lord. Wasting no time, Gandil cuts the crank rope to open the main gate, jumps into the vehicle, and makes his escape using Elsa as a hostage. The villagers of Lag try to shut the gate, but a few of the apes had already made it to the entrance, stopping them just in time. From this point on, there are demi-humans inside the village. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.